We are 1 week away from another National Signing Day, and we're ready to talk Ohio State football with all of you for the next 60 minutes. So leave those comments and questions in the live chat. We will get to them. We've got our distinguished panel of experts, Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts up there at the top, Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Scoop, and Kevin Noon, also from Buckeye Scoop. And I continue to be amazed at the wealth of talent they have there at Buckeye Scoop. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Doing great.
All right. We've got another Buckeye in the fold for the 2023 class. It should be a familiar name to Ohio State fans. Will Smith Jr., and we're not connecting him to any movie fame here. Kevin, what can you tell us about Will Smith?
I've been sold a bad bill of goods. I knew that he wasn't connected to Will Smith, the actor. He's connected to Will Smith, the all-time, one of the all-time Ohio State great defensive linemen. Had a very productive career with New Orleans Saints before he was tragically killed in a traffic altercation. But Will Smith Jr. plays at Dublin Kaufman High School here in Central Ohio, class of 23. 6'3", 260, a guy that I think that probably projects to play inside, probably like a 3-tech type of guy, whereas Daddy was more of that, what we like to call the end, an edge. I think that we see Will Jr. moving inside a little bit more. He has some time. He has a couple more years to really kind of develop out, kind of a mid 3-star in terms of the recruiting services, the ones that I've looked at this point. I think that he could probably get himself into the 4-star range. Just a great story. I mean, and we've seen Ohio State legacies go elsewhere, Antoine Winfield Jr. being one of them, and fans losing their minds over that. Well, you bring in the new defensive staff, even though, you have to figure Larry Johnson was very involved in this one, but Jim Knowles and everybody else, they get in, they offer Will Smith Jr., and I think we all kind of said it's just a matter of time, and that time only took a couple of days. He was on campus last weekend for an unofficial, and shortly thereafter, pops for Ohio State. So I think it's a really big pickup for him, and it gives them, of their four members of the class of 23, 2 are in-state, 2 are out-of-state.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember when it was John Cooper and Fred Puggich, the assistant coach, the defensive coordinator, went up to Utica, New York in class of 2000 and brought back Will Smith. He was a national top 100 player and obviously stayed with Ohio State through the coaching change on to Jim Tressel, was an All-American for the Buckeyes. And when they celebrated the national championship in 2002, they brought him, I think, to the shot for a basketball game. And Jim Tressel, picked Will Smith to be kind of out in front of the group, and the whole crowd was chanting "one more year, one more year." And I don't know if that impacted it or not, but he came back and had another outstanding year for the Buckeyes in 2003, and then went on to the NFL. But a lot of great memories, man. He made a play, I want to say right before halftime, he may have sacked Dorsey and caused a fumble, and Darian Scott tried to pick it up and run with it and got tackled about the 10-yard line. That was a critical moment in that Fiesta Bowl win over Miami. I think Will Smith created that fumble. So if he lives up anything close to what his dad did at Ohio State, it would be tremendous, and obviously a legacy situation here coming full circle. His dad, as Kevin alluded to, was killed in a road rage incident in New Orleans. It's been a few years ago. I don't have the exact year, probably 2, 3, 4 years ago, and very unfortunate situation. But everything I hear is just positive about Will Smith Jr. and how he's a good student. Actually, he attended Wellington, which is a prep school in Upper Arlington in Central Ohio, up through the end of his sophomore year, but was able to play football at Dublin Kaufman because Wellington doesn't have a football team. He was one of 4 freshmen in the last 20 years when Mark Crabtree was the head coach there that got to play at Kaufman as a freshman. And I don't have the other ones, but I would assume maybe a Mike Adams was in that list, or a Jake Stoneburner, hard to say. But at any rate, maybe one of those great quarterbacks who went through there as well. So at any rate, you look at what he's going to bring to the table, another year of development. As Kevin said, he's going to have a college body when he steps on campus, upwards of 270 to 280 pounds probably. And I think it'll be up if Larry Johnson remains the defensive line coach a year from now. Then it'll be up to him to slot him and get him started on his college path. But obviously a great story. He's only ranked in the 500s nationally, and I'm told not to worry too much about that, and probably about 15 to 20 in terms of the state of Ohio this year overall for 2023. But again, don't get wrapped around the axle about the ranking. I personally do not get wrapped around the axle about the rankings. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun watching him grow and develop and follow in his dad's footsteps in some small way.
Yeah, I go back to the Will Smith Sr. recruiting, and I think whether it was Bill Kurlick back then or Tom Lemming, where that's really where you get to learn about these future Buckeyes and who they are. And I think at one point he was listed as like a linebacker, 6'3", 230 or whatever. And you look at the rest of the linebackers in that Ohio State class, which included Darian Scott, who was listed as a linebacker then, Robert Reynolds, and maybe the most ballyhooed was Marco Cooper, who didn't end up, panning out. But then they all go there. They find their levels. And it's interesting to me that we talk about Jim Knowles' use of the Leo, which is a defensive end that'll stand up and move around and play a little linebacker times. Will Smith used to do that. He would move around and stand up behind the defensive line at times to give you an idea of the kind of athlete he was. But yeah, definitely one of the greats. And I don't think he was. I don't think he's been overshadowed by the Bosas or the Chase Young, because I think for his generation, that's who he was. He was of that ilk, and maybe the numbers weren't there, but he was a perfect bridge from the Finkus and Vrabel. You got the Will Smith, and then you've got the modern guys, and he was every bit as good as those guys, and just asked to do different things and was capable of doing different things, and then went on to even more special stuff in the NFL. And so go ahead, see what his kid has. And if he's only as good as Antoine Winfield Jr., well, then you've got an All-American.
As Steve alludes to, 540 is his national ranking, number 71 defensive lineman, 14th rated player in the state of Ohio at 6'3", 260. That's according to the composite. Hard commit Will Smith to Ohio State. Number 93, correct? The Will Smith. Yes. All right. As Steve is letting everyone know and encouraging everyone to hit the like button and leave those questions, and we will get to as many questions as possible. And it certainly helps if you hit up the super chat to get your question or comment recognized here at the Voice of College Football. So understand these three gentlemen have tons to do. They're covering Ohio State football and basketball on a daily basis, recruiting and everything that goes with it. And they give us an hour plus of their time, plus with coordination of schedules. It's much more than that each and every week. So please show some appreciation here. Super Chat's available. Also, we would love to have a sponsor here at the Voice of College Football on our Ohio State channel. All right. To quote WCMH, who I believe broke this story, or at least or is the top of the Google search, I should say. Ohio State announced on Monday the athletics department is creating an NIL Edge team to help athletes continue to navigate through the name, image, and likeness era. The first 6 months saw 220 Buckeyes, keep in mind those are athletes, not just football players, engage in 608 reported NIL activities with a total compensation value of just under $3 million. I don't know if they're still counting Quinn Ewers. He may push that needle just a smidge. So, Tony, what does this really tell us about what Ohio State's attempting to do in the NIL territory?
Yeah, first in regards to the numbers, there's some questions there. Are these just an annual thing, or is all of Quinn Ewers stuff in there, and a lot of that is like a 3-year deal. Like the car lease is a 3-year lease. Is all of that combined in there? So I think there's still some questions about all of those numbers and what does it entail. But the Edge program, I think, is interesting because over the first 6 months, Ohio State has been a little bit of standoff. They can't do deals. They can't make deals. And now, as the rules have kind of solidified or the boundaries have been pushed to you see where the rules are, now they've created a department that can go and find deals for student athletes in all different businesses, or the alumni and the charities being invented as we speak, where they're almost acting as agents for the student athletes, and they can go find deals for players, or they can go to businesses and find players for those deals. And so now Ohio State is able to take a more active approach, or they are taking a more active approach, especially with this invention of these NIL charities and the entire outfit of it. It's all just being you're just figuring out what can be done, what is allowed to be done, what are the ways to get around the existing rules, how do you invent new ways to get money to players. And so now this is a department that has been created, and they'll basically be a point person in each varsity sport, of which there are 36 or 37 at Ohio State. So there's going to be more opportunities for athletes, because Ohio State is going to take a more active approach, and it should allow for a more passive approach for the student athletes as well, where they can focus more on the book learning rather than the deal signing.
You want me to talk about NIL?
Yeah, if you've got anything on it.
I think that without leadership from the NCAA, I think Ohio State, like a lot of schools, is just kind of feeling its way through the dark, and what should we be doing and what shouldn't we be doing. And one of the head coaches, either Coach Holtman or Coach Day, was asked about this back in the fall. And as I recall, how much can the school do to help facilitate and these kind of things? And their feeling was Gene Smith's direction to them was to live within the spirit of the rule, whatever the rule may be. So I don't think anybody has a firm grasp of what the NCAA is going to consider allowable for a school to do. Certainly they can't hire the players themselves to do NIL, but can they work as a de facto third party to help broker or as a matchmaker, so to speak, to, we hear that such and such Ford dealer would like this, this person would be perfect for this, or they're specifically asking about this person, how do we, connect those dots? So again, we're in the infancy of this, and I don't think anybody really knows what direction it's going to go. But like so many things in college athletics, there is no leadership to take the bull by the horns and settle these issues. There's no commissioner basically the NCAA, and this hit me like a ton of bricks this week. Here's one. I was doing a numbers crunch on the scholarships, and I was of the assumption that the super seniors, which Ohio State will have several, would not count toward the 85 this year. Oh, I'm mistaken. The NCAA is now, they're allowing, player X to have a 6th year of eligibility as a super senior, but it counts this year in your 85, whereas last year it didn't. And they did that specifically because there's a lot of schools that don't want to pay for players 86, 87, 88, 89, and 90. Ohio State can afford, an extra 10 guys if they wanted to. They'd find the money and do it. But Kansas doesn't want any part of that. So, and there's more Kansases out there with votes than there are Ohio States. So the schools, and everyone will villainize the NCAA for this, for, the bad NCAA set this at 85. It's not the bad NCAA, it's the bad schools who, on one hand, it's the Lord giveth. Kyle Young, you can have a 6th year, but such and such freshman who would ordinarily play at Ohio State, you're going to have to go to Ohio this year because Ohio State's out of scholarships. So, that's my soapbox today on something I discovered that as of today, and this could change. I think there was one head coach already who's come out up in arms about it. I forget who it was, but very eloquent about it, just saying the NCAA has tied their hands in terms of scholarships. It's great they're allowing super seniors, but for the first year there was an allowance, and I guess this year there's not. So that's another example of poor or no leadership from the NCAA at the national level.
The NCAA not doing things correctly. Color me surprised on that one. I mean, Lord. I mean, yeah, I think that the whole super senior thing, we weren't really sure exactly how that was going to work in terms of how they were going to count or not. So good get by Steve on tracking some of that information down there. But, I just think getting back to the bigger picture of NIL, I think the biggest concern is that we still see now at this point that there are inquiries being put into certain systems and programs in terms of how their NIL is being put together. And, oh, don't worry, this isn't going to get weaponized. Well, guess what? It's getting weaponized at this point. So, you have to evolve or die with the times. And, if you can walk up to a line and still be in the right, you've got to walk all the way up to that line. So I think that it's important for schools like Ohio State to be as aggressive as possible while maintaining both feet on the proper side of the line of the law of this. But since we really don't know what the law is, I mean, it seems like it's a moving goalpost.
Well, and I'm just looking at Dave Doran, NC State coach, I think is the guy.
That may be the guy
who kind of blew the whistle on this, because he was asked, they only signed 12 guys in their 2022 class. And he was asked about that and back in, I guess, December, but saying that the NCAA has completely failed everybody, and especially the coaches in terms of the roster management, that to have this as a 1-year thing doesn't make sense when you've granted 5 years of players this gift, and then to only allow it to extend 1 year. Like that's not how it was ever explained to us. It was basically these guys will never count against, if that super senior will never count as part of it. And now can you go back on it when you've got programs who have recruited to that limitation, or do they just get screwed because, well, like, how, do you force schools to start cutting players now? I don't understand it. And, obviously it's a terrible situation that this all happened, and it's put so many programs in, but it seems like an easy fix would just be like, they're never going to count against the cap. And I know Wisconsin, when the NCAA gave the option to bring all of these guys back, like Wisconsin didn't do it for anybody. Like none of the nonprofit or the non-revenue sports, they didn't bring anybody back. Ohio State brings everybody. They offered it to everybody. And if you wanted to come back, come back. Barry Alvarez like, no, we're not doing that. That's too expensive. And so this, Steve's right. You've got a lot of schools who would rather we'll just, it's too expensive. It's too time consuming, and it limits what they can do on the recruiting trail. So boy, that's an interesting, we've just all been operating under the assumption that those guys are all free, basically, in terms of the cap numbers.
Yeah. Ohio State, to my understanding, including Zach Harrison coming back, that would have put them at 86 under my original accounting. And when I published that story, people came out of the woodwork and said, you're wrong, because I wasn't counting super seniors. Mm-hmm. Well, there were 3 super seniors that we knew for a fact were coming back. Noah Ruggles was one of them. The transfer from Oklahoma State, McAllister, who's played 4 years at Oklahoma State, would be one of them. And there's one more who is certain to come back. Off the top of my head, I can't remember. I'd have to look it up. Well, I've since ascertained that there's 3 more who are probably coming back. So the actual number for Ohio State is 89 plus 3 is 92. And so what's going to happen, And if they had Christian Miller, which is probably a long shot in that 2022 class, that would make it 93. That put them 8 guys over. What's going to happen is either they're going to come back to one or more of those fringe super senior guys like a Taraja Mitchell or somebody else who, may or may not have a role, and say, look, there's no place at the end for you. You can have your scholarship, and but we can't play you, on our 85. Or they're going to look at some guys who are going into their 3rd or 4th year who've never made an impact and just say, hey, Cincinnati could use a left tackle, or Louisville could use our friend at Louisville could use a outside linebacker, or, I'm just throwing positions out there without actual names to them. But you follow what I'm saying. They're going to start riffing guys. They made Gray Shirt a marginal freshman who wasn't going to play this year anyway. So there's going to have to be some changes come from this roster, because right now, as I said, I think they're 7 over. So as of today, and Christian Miller would put them 8 over. So
Mitch Rossi was the 3rd name that you would have had.
Mitch Rossi, yes. Mitch Rossi is in that group, obviously, because he announced he was coming back. And then
Bradley Robinson.
Yeah, Brad Robinson. I'm not sure if he's on scholarship or not.
I don't know if he's on scholarship.
I don't know either. I just assume he is because he's been your starter for 3 years.
Yeah, but he also might be on a doctorate scholarship because he's been in college forever.
Yeah, but the other 3 that we were kind of hunting on were Jerron Cage, Taraja Mitchell, Seven Banks was kind of in that group, and it sounds to me like
Ote.
Yeah, Nate Ote was another one, Steph Ote. So Ote. So I think those 3 are working out. Banks may be rehabbing, but may not be coming back, is what I was told. So again, take all of this with a grain of salt. Ohio State internally is working to audit its numbers. They are not over as of today. The day that they would be over is June 8, 9, 10, when those last 10 or 12 incoming freshmen who did not enroll early, they show up. They've got to go under the 85 at that point. You got to be no more than 85 on that day, because you can't pay for more than 85 people on scholarship at any one given time, is the way I understand it. So, there could be some wiggle room here or there, whatever. But, this is all uncharted territory. I think the NCAA is going to be called to the carpet, as Dave Doran started that, I think, as the AFCA gets involved in this and uses its bully pulpit to say, look here, Indianapolis, we need you to fix this. Give us 3, give us 4, give us a few slots. And maybe it's a sliding scale where this year you get 5 and next year you get 4, following year you get 3, something like that, because that would make more sense to me.
It wouldn't surprise me to see where we sit here on January 26th and what we're talking about on April 26th looking different, because I think that there is going to have to be some relief. And you know what? And I'm not going to pick on the have-nots in college football because it's very easy. And then I end up getting a direct message from somebody saying, I went to school there. How dare you pick on them? But, these schools that aren't up for necessarily wanting to compete with the big boys, which again is why I think we're going to need to see a split in Division I FBS, because you've got the 2 sides of the coin here. But, I think that there are going to be enough teams there that are the revenue makers of the sport that are going to say, so you're telling us that we have to sit there and just kick kids out of the program, essentially, is what it is. You're kicking kids out of the program. Hey, there may be a better opportunity for you elsewhere. Where? That's not my problem. That just really seems to go against the mission statement on a situation that was out of everybody's control. You sit there, you give them a little bit of leeway last year, and then you're just going to sit there and cut it out cold turkey. That just kind of seems to be a bad look. And as the NC2A moves further and further toward being like, well, we just want to push this all onto the conferences and everybody else. We don't want to be the ones making these decisions. Well, bully up and make a decision, because you're dealing with, you already have a portal where you're going to have a lot of young men and women enter over various sports, and they're never going to find a home and see their careers come to a sudden and abrupt halt. Let's not screw up another thing.
But you even said like it's between the haves and have-nots. I might have to disagree because I just mentioned Barry Alvarez not wanting to pay for people. Like they are part of the Big Ten, and if you are part of the haves, you need to spend because you are raking in all of this money. And how long did we say that about programs like Purdue and whoever would just bring in the money and not do anything with it? It's like you eventually have to start using it and spending it and putting it to good use for it's the football program bringing it in, so you might want to put it back out there. But I just the thought that not bringing these people back or having to cut them. Ohio State will get down to whatever number they need to get down to. Spring football has that way where players learn where they are, and I don't know that Taraja Mitchell needs any more information. Like he was replaced on defense last year, and Ohio State is now adding the number one will linebacker in the nation and CJ Hicks to the company. And so there are guys that I think there's writing on the wall, but I think once the coaches sit them down, they're going to have to read it for them and spell it out for them what exactly is on that wall. And then once you go through spring football and you see this guy is there are 3 defensive linemen and probably 3 offensive linemen that should no longer be at Ohio State, and they'll realize that eventually. And there's a couple other players that, even a guy like Cameron Babb, who has fought through so much. If you have to get down to 85, can you afford to keep him around? And that's some of these thoughts that you're going to have to, you've got to put these guys, you got to rank the guys in terms of who can we let go, who do we not want to let go. Obviously, you want Cameron Babb to have every opportunity to eventually play for Ohio State. He has been injured so often and torn his knees up, almost every year. You don't want to, like, if he's fighting back to come back and play, you want to give him an opportunity. It would be a really bad look to have him do all of this and be like, we don't have a spot for you. We thought we did. Blame the NCAA. It's like, no, you can't blame the NCAA. I mean, you can, but it's Ohio State who is telling him no and letting somebody else have his scholarship.
What's the penalty for trying to go with more than 85 players? Nobody knows. Nobody's ever tried to do it before. We all worry, oh my God, how are they going to get it down to 85? They always do. They always do.
Well, Ohio State got dinged for it. Under Meyer, they went a few months with more than 85 on scholarship. I don't know what part of the calendar it was. And they basically came back and told them, you're going to have to go down to 83 or 84 for one season, which they had to do. So that was the penalty. You had to go down a man or 2 for another full season. So, yeah, it happened.
But wasn't that for the 2011, the Chatgate stuff?
I don't remember.
They went down to 82 for 3 years, I think.
Well, that was related to that, but Meyer was also over. He was dinged on a secondary violation for being over.
But they don't do a good job of, I mean, again, what they tell the staffs and the programs is different than what they're going to tell us, which is about nothing. Because you say June 8, June 9, June 10. I always was under the belief that you had to be under by the start of fall camp. Mm-hmm. That was always my belief. And I always wondered how that worked for summer.
And that may be why they got in trouble, because maybe that was what they were under the impression of, and they went all summer with 86 or 87 guys on scholarship, and that's how they got dinged. They got dinged. Meyer got dinged. There was a secondary violation. He had more than 85 guys on scholarship at one time, and they, for whatever reason, they paid for college for more than 85 guys for at least one academic term. So they got in trouble for it.
The amazing thing is generally you end up under 85 because that's just how attrition is, because then there's room to award a walk-on or two. Like Jim Tressel would save some spots for walk-ons. And you're going to have to see so many guys get booted, and then players sometimes, you guys, they even quit during the season. I've seen it happen during a game even.
Do you know, this is crazy, when I did that accounting, since the start of preseason camp on August the 1st, they've had eight guys transferred out. 8 guys transferred out. Jacoby, Pope, Gant, there's 3. Craig Young, Ryan Watts, and there's 3 more. Well, the 2 quarterbacks, Ewers and Miller.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's 7 right there off the top of my head, and there's one more that, as we say every time one of those comes up, the guy I work with, Dave Biddle, we have an internal text chain. When somebody leaves the program, playing time will remain unaffected.
Was Jameson Williams in that?
He may have been before that. He was back in the summer, I think, or after spring ball.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Craig Young's playing time was not unaffected. He was actually had started, I think, the Michigan State game, played some against Michigan and didn't like what he was told, I guess. And I don't know, just picked up his ball and went where did he go, to Kansas or somewhere?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, not all transfers are program led. I mean, sometimes the guy's just going to say, well, this program wants to keep him, and he's going to be like, see
Peace
ya.
out, A-Town.
Thanks for all the fish. I'm on my way out, I mean, so, even at programs like Ohio State and Alabama, you're going to have to deal with that from time to time. But it's amazing, with that number that Steve threw out there of 8, and we're still sitting there looking at them potentially being at 92 or 93 once all the dust settles.
Yep. Ewers, I made $1 million in NIL money at Ohio State riding the bench. What can I make at Texas? 10 million?
The funny thing is you've got to get down to 85 by the season. And then by the bowl game, you're at like 75 because the players have left.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy.
That sums it up right there. Crazy. Well, I am to stay silent on this one. And Tony and Kevin, not a word out of you. Yakov only wants to hear from Steve.
Yeah.
Back in the day. Were you big USFL fan?
Well, I'll tell you this. That was what, like 83, 84, 85, 86 in that range. And what I remember about the USFL was it was springtime football, obviously. And I think ABC was heavily invested in it. And they were showing games like on Saturday and Sunday afternoons, kind of like what we saw here a few years ago with Cardale Jones and the XFL playing some springtime football or whatever. And I was not really all that into it. By that point of the year, I was kind of following, the end of the basketball season and the start of the baseball season more than I was really worried about watching minor league football on television in the spring in Ohio when I could be outside, doing whatever. I think, I remember Herschel Walker. I remember Steve Young made his name in the USFL. And Doug Flutie was a big USFL fan. But other than that, I don't remember a whole hell of a lot about it. Didn't watch much of it. I know they played at Giants Stadium, which I thought, well, this is interesting. They're playing another league's football games in a stadium named for an NFL team, Giants. But beyond that, I really didn't give it much thought. And honestly, any of these springtime leagues that have popped up over the years, I think we all watched the first XFL game 20 years ago out of curiosity, and then nobody watched after the first week. It got like a 10 the first week, then a 4, then a 2, and then a lowest ever rated NBC primetime show ever by a wide margin by week 4, because it was just, there was no reason to watch it. There was just nothing compelling about it. And I don't think there ever will be with these springtime football leagues. I just don't know what the grab is for this. I know NFL football, we saw the ratings for these games, probably the greatest playoff, whatever it's called, divisional weekend for the quality of the games and the ratings of these games, probably both off the charts. But, that doesn't equate to watching a guy who can't even make the Jaguars roster playing, on April 23rd. I just don't think anybody cares. So I don't know. It's kind of my 2 cents on that.
Yakov, you asked the wrong person. That's what that came down to. I could have gone on for 5 hours, and these other two probably the same.
Did you live in a home city of a USFL
Love
team?
USFL.
Did you live in a home city or go to any games?
No, I didn't go to any games. No, I was living in Stowe, Ohio, but I was thinking of this the other day. I don't know. It doesn't seem like I got enough time for anything as an adult, but back then, I remember being in college, having like a job and an internship and, going to school and having to study and pass tests and write papers and all that stuff. And it seemed like I had still had time to go out with my buddies all the time, still had time to watch every sporting event and memorize every statistic imaginable. So I don't know why I can't do that now, but that was a long, long time ago.
I had an XFL football that was,
you did.
And it might still be in my mom's garage, actually. I do remember Steve mentioned the ratings. Like, I watched that first week, I was enthralled. The next week, you're just like, am I really sitting here doing this? I should be doing something else.
Yeah.
And then the week after, I did.
USFL, yes.
I was on board with the XFL because I was producing a show for Fox Sports Net that aired in Florida, and we had the Orlando Rage, and they sent me a hat, and I can be bought cheaply. So when they sent me a hat, I was fully on board. I was part of that Rage crew, and I made it pretty much through the whole season, but wasn't disappointed to see it go.
I'm coming up with Marcus Merrick, Tim Spencer, and Gary Williams playing in the USFL. Those are the three I'm coming up with off the top of my head.
That sounds right.
All right. We've got a Buckeyes question coming in from Just Kenny. Appreciate that so much. And the Super Chat contribution. What are you guys hearing about the cornerbacks room? We have Burke Johnson, Hancock from the 21 class. Who's ready to take that next step? Who wants to take that one on?
Anybody?
Everybody jump all at once. I mean, I think if you sit there and you have Burke Johnson and Hancock, you've got, you're going to have Cameron Brown coming off of injury. I mean, you want to see guys develop behind them, but I don't know if we're going to see a situation of where they're going to be like, well, damn it, we're going to roll corners. We're going to play 3, 4, 5, 6, however many that we can. I like some of the young players that they have at the position. I've been a big Ja'Kalen Johnson fan. I mean, coming off of last season, I think that he's somebody who could take a big step forward. You mentioned Jordan Hancock there. I mean, we certainly have not necessarily seen a ton of Jordan Hancock, so we don't know necessarily what that's going to be. I mean, I think it's going to be an interesting battle between J.K. Johnson and Jordan Hancock to see who might emerge from those two.
And don't forget about Legend Cavazos in there as well, the most experienced of those guys in terms of battling to be that number 3. I think it's one of the things I'm looking forward to seeing is the development of Jordan Hancock and J.K. Johnson. And I think those two are maybe the reason why the Buckeyes weren't more aggressive in the transfer portal, because they believe in those two, and not just those two, but Cam Brown and Denzel Burke are going to be – I don't know that there's going to be a better duo of corners anywhere in the Big Ten. I don't know about the rest of the nation. But those are two guys that are good enough to start at Ohio State, as we've seen. And I think Cam Brown's best football is still ahead of him. And I think if he could just stay healthy, I think he's going to be really good and better than anybody they've had, the Sean Wade, the recent, Seven Banks. I mean, he should be well ahead of those guys this next season if he can just stay healthy. And that's something that, Sean Wade also had issues dealing with health and being healthy and being at his fullest. But I think those two are going to put everybody off on a good foot, and then you can ease in J.K. Johnson, Jordan Hancock, Legend Cavazos. And if one or two of those guys are as good as the other two or as good as Cam Brown, then you can rotate them. But what you can't do is rotate. That's something that Kerry Combs always talked about. You can't rotate the third guy in if he's not as good as the second guy. Now, you have to play a second guy, so maybe he's not as good as the first guy. But if you're going to have a rotation, there can't be any drop-off throughout that, and it's something that has kept them from doing that at times. And Jeff Hafley never really liked it anyway, but I don't know that he had the corners for it because he was pretty good with what he had, and that defense clearly worked. But I think there's a solid foundation there of corners, and that could end up being a really should end up being a tremendous cornerback class, a 2021 class.
Yeah, I think it's a position of strength for Ohio State going into this season. and obviously a new cornerbacks coach coming in, Tim Walton, who's been working in the NFL for a few years. And it's weird, we talked about him last week, but played at OSU back in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, and went into coaching and bounced around, but the time was never right for him to come back to Ohio State. Here now, almost 30 years after he left as a player, he's coming back as an assistant coach. So that is kind of cool for him, I think, to come back to his old stomping grounds. And, I think you can't have enough people who are invested in Ohio State at Ohio State. And I think that's an important thing to remember as they build staffs and hire staff people and also recruit players that, you need that Ohio background, I think, at some point in there to make it all fit together and work right. So I think that the cornerback group is going to be very solid. Should not be something that holds this defense back, I wouldn't think, this coming season.
Before we get to some feedback from All-Americans on the Buckeyes and Ohio State facilities, let's check out what our All-Americans here have in store this week and available for you. So, Steve, we'll start with you. Where can people find you, and what do you got going on this week?
Bucknuts.com is the place. Twitter at Steve Hellwagon with an EN. And this has been a rough week for us. Guy who worked with us for about 18 years, Gary Housetu, passed away on last Friday, after a long bout with cancer. Just a great guy. I worked with him all the way back to probably 1997 at Buckeye Sports Bulletin, and a very loyal and devoted guy. And I know he's a friend of both these guys here, Tony and Kevin, as well. And I would be remiss if I didn't to bring up that we are celebrating his life and everything he did to help us at Bucknuts. And he really helped me get our site off the ground back in the early stages, 2003, 2004, when it was kind of the Wild West out there. It was us and the Ozone, and that was about it. So we obviously, there's been a proliferation of websites that cover Ohio State since then, but Gary was integral in getting what we do off the ground, and really want to thank him and salute him for everything he did. And he fought cancer hard and had colon cancer. It spread to his liver, and that's ultimately what shut down his system and cost him his life. And my public service announcement today is I'm going to have a colonoscopy here in a week or two, and it'll be my second one. So if you're hitting that 45 or 50 spot, you're supposed to go every 3 years, I guess. And so this will be my second one coming up.
Yeah, well said about Gary. I know just seeing all of the people reaching out on Facebook and sharing their pictures of him at tailgates and all of that stuff. Loved by a lot of, we knew him, worked with him, but like so many Buckeye fans loved him as well. And so that was all, heartwarming to see. You can find me at Buckeye Scoop. It's a terrible transition. At Tony Gerdeman on Twitter, and obviously here every Wednesday with you guys.
Yeah, I also want to send my condolences over the loss of Gary. I've known Gary for a long time. Makes it kind of difficult to sit there and just talk about the make-believe world that we're in and covering sports and everything else. I turned 50 this year, so I probably need to go check out the doctor as well on everything. Men's health is something that we don't, maybe talk about as much as we should, but, everybody take care of yourself. But making my awkward transition, you can find me on Twitter at Kevin_Noon, and of course at BuckeyeScoop.com, where I just published a story today talking about Ohio State season openers against Power 5 competition going all the way back to 1980. And of course, Power 5 was not a thing, or in 82, I should say. Power 5 was not a thing until the 2000 something or other in terms of where you were at. So I kind of went through and looked at games that were against teams that were in the Southwest Conference, the Big 8, the Big East at that point. Didn't really do a deep dive in any game in particular, but just kind of a mile-high view with Notre Dame as the season opener coming up in 2022.
All right. Appreciate all of you. And certainly hope everyone out there appreciates what we have here each and every week on Ohio State Buckeyes Live. And yeah, we are just talking fantasy stuff, and there's real life people affected and death out there to great people, unfortunately. 247 Sports conducted a survey of 88 All-Americans at the All-American game and practices leading up to the game. And Ohio State fared well in the feedback given to facilities. And you got to think that those guys were obviously at and visiting the very best across the nation. Tony, you can lead us off in regards to where you think the status of the facilities truly is. And hey, these are the guys that count. And so their feedback is enormous.
Well, I wonder how many of these people have been to Northwestern and seen what's going on there, or like what percentage of these 88 have been to places that have been built before. I don't know, 85, whenever the WAC was built. And now there's certainly been, new construction inside there, and there's a lot going on around the Woody and certainly inside, but I don't know, the parts of it look a little bit dated, but obviously we don't get to go to all of the parts that the players do. And I'm also wondering, when they talk about facilities, are they also talking about how they're fed? Because sometimes you can win recruits with honey chicken. I think we know that story from the past, or lobster, or these official visits, how they feed players. But in terms of the facilities, I mean, we only get to see the practice fields, really. And there's a lobby with a lot of trophies, so that's pretty impressive. And there's more trophies inside, but I don't know, it doesn't seem as fancy as what you've seen from other places, just in the places where I've been. And it's kind of, you've also, like, there's a lack of windows on the interior of that building and where some of the offices are. But if the players like it, you've got the upgraded area where you've got like a 24/7 chef, you've got the barber, you've got the video games and the pop shot and the pool table. So there are things like that, basketball court that they've added. So they've certainly tried to modernize as much as possible with the original facade.
Yeah, I've been around. I can remember going to, I think it was senior tackle there in 1987. It was one of the first years they used it. And they had senior tackle at the Woody Hayes Center the day before they played at Michigan, and went to that. And that was kind of my first time being inside the indoor football field that they had there, which is still the same indoor football field 35 years later that they had then. They just redid the roof here in the last 3 or 4 years. That took them about 2 years to get the roof of that thing fixed. They have remodeled it any number of times. I think early in the Tressel regime, they remodeled it. Late in the Tressel regime, they remodeled it. Early in the Meyer regime, they remodeled it. Late in the Meyer regime, they remodeled it. So, they've tried to keep it up to date, and I agree with these guys. I think the new wing that they added on the east end of the building is probably the most important thing. When you talk about, I think that's where the new weight facility is, as well as overlooking that is the lounge and the meals area, where they have several different meal stations for the guys at feeding time and different things like that. So there's a lot to like there. They also redid the other part of the building, which we called the old Biggs facility. Really went in and redid it as well. So the football people really don't see that very much, but the other sports use it. So it's nice as well. Facilities isn't a race that you win. It's a race that I've found in my 30 years of covering this, that you just continuously are running this race, and you are trying to find $100,000 to update that, and trying to find $1 million worth of pledges to update this, and You know, that's what it is. That's what the fundraising wing of this program is all about. I think they tap on former players who have made it in the NFL or professional basketball, the very few of them, to give back. I know Michael Redd gave back a bunch of money. I think Evan Turner did as well, to try and support, some changes at the shot for basketball. And I think Robert Smith, for one, years ago, was one who donated a bunch of money to get some things changed at the Woody Hayes Center. But, again, that was years ago. So it's a constant battle to upgrade, improve, have the shiniest, the newest, the nicest, the biggest, the best. And it's a race you can never win. It's a never ending battle.
Right. I mean, there certainly were days where the Woody Hayes facility was the brightest and best facility out there, and I mean, it's shown its age at various points, and they keep throwing money into it, and they're going to have to keep throwing money into it because, where are you going? Where are you going to put a new one? I mean, starting over. So I know that there's some campaigns going on right now about doing a pretty sizable upgrade there. I haven't necessarily seen any blueprints or artist renditions, but you have to sit there and try and keep up in waterfalls and slides and everything else with the Clemsons and the Alabamas of the world. And I saw a video from Alabama's facilities and just some of the isolation chambers that they had in the locker room for the players. And, I've had the opportunity to go into the locker room at the Woody, not as opposed to the one I've been in both of them, but the one at the Woody, which is where you spend more time than the one at Ohio Stadium. And while it's certainly nice, I mean, they still have some catching up to do to keep up with the programs, but you don't win this race. I mean, you just may get more current, but, it's just like a car. You can go out there and go get yourself a 2022 car, but it's just going to age. I mean, it's just the way that it works out there. But Tony was right. I don't know how many of those kids have been to Northwestern to see that facility there on the water or whatever. So you're looking at 88 kids who probably really only made visits to 40 programs nationally of the 130 Division I-A FBS teams. So, and while maybe some of your lower MAC schools aren't necessarily going to be able to compete, you have programs out there that are making some huge investments, Northwestern being one of them. I'll talk about them on the positive side, but I'm not sure I would have Ohio State in the top 5 in terms of just the facilities in general, just because where they are in their update cycle compared to some other programs.
Yeah, the constant chasing. Do you guys remember, I don't know if it was 8 years ago, we were brought in and they showed us the light wall that the players use to, it's just a wall with a bunch of pinholes and a light would come on and you tap it and it measures your reaction and vision, and it increases your reaction and vision, and it helps receivers become more aware. And that was the new latest and greatest. And I'm wondering now if that's just somebody's normal treadmill, and that's where the clothes are. Somebody's just throwing clothes on top of that over at the WAC. And how many of these types of things over the years have they gotten where you'd have to have this? Because you got salesmen to bring all of this equipment in probably every day. Hey, look what we've invented. You need this. Alabama has it. And Urban Meyer's oh well, if Alabama has it, then I need it. And when Urban took over, he did some remodeling in the WAC and took away the media lounge. That was one of the first things to go. And why? Well, just to do it, to make players uncomfortable, to create some differences in the facility, just because things are new now. So there had to be something different.
I miss that soda machine that we had access to that never had the right balance of syrup and CO2. It was either clear because there wasn't enough syrup, or it was just syrup. So let us back, please. Let us back in the Woody.
It was offered up in the live chat. Another Buckeye who made it to the USFL, a rather well-known one. Archie Griffin. I did not remember him in the USFL, and I was pretty up on USFL players, and there's good reason. 10 carries, 11 yards for the 1985 Jacksonville Bulls. It was a short stint for Archie. He was supposed to be there back, but Mike Rozier took over there, and he was well past his prime and off to retirement after that. All right. I think we've done some decent work today. Thanks to you guys, Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts, of course, Tony Gerdeman and Kevin Noon, Buckeye Scoop. You guys got to head on over there and check out their coverage of Ohio State football and basketball every day. We'll be back here hopefully next Wednesday at 1:30 Eastern time, but hit that bell for the notifications once you subscribe, because sometimes we've got to switch up on the time and want you to be here live. And if you've missed any portion of the show, of course, it's going to post here in just a few minutes so you can watch what you have missed. Steve, Tony, Kevin, appreciate it. You guys have a great week.
Yep, you too.
Take care.